Okay, let's dive right into this because right now, India's capital is literally in the grip of one of the most massive youth-led protests we've seen in years. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the rapid rise and the incredibly intense on-the-ground reality of the Cockroach Janta Party, or the CJP. What started out as, a wave of frustration over the NEET UG medical exam paper leaks has totally exploded into a nationwide movement. Over the next few minutes, we're going to look closely at the facts, the timelines, and the profound political shockwaves radiating from the streets of New Delhi all the way to the Prime Minister's residence.
All right, let's start with Section 1, the Jantar-Mantar Standoff.
To really wrap our heads around the scale of this movement, we need to drop right into the tense reality on the ground at Jantar Mantar. It's this historic observatory that is basically transformed into the epicenter of the standoff. I mean, just look at this. The sheer volume of youth captured here is staggering. Right in the center, you can see CJP founder Abhijit Deepke with a drum, rallying this absolute sea of young people holding placards. The energy? It's raw and it's palpable. Remember, these aren't seasoned politicians. These are students standing shoulder to shoulder demanding strict accountability for a compromised exam system. Specifically, they are calling for the immediate resignation of Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan.
Now, what's really interesting about the anatomy of this protest is the modern response to some pretty grueling conditions. You've got over 1,000 protesters camping out in Delhi's extreme, punishing heat and humidity, waving the Indian flag. The security response has been so massive that the Delhi Metro actually had to shut down 16 stations just to control the crowds. But here's where it gets fascinating. To keep morale high, anonymous supporters from all over India, and honestly even overseas, are using delivery apps like Swiggy and Zomato to send free food directly to the protesters. We're talking endless deliveries of biryani, pizza, rice, and dal just arriving at the barricades to keep these young people fed as they hold their ground.
That incredible groundswell of support brings us to this powerful statement from CJP's spokesman, Ashutosh Ranka. Speaking to the cheering crowds, he said, "In the country where people had forgotten how to ask questions, in the country where criticizing the government was considered treason, we have now awakened that country." This quote perfectly captures the overarching mission of the CJP. You see, this is no longer just about a compromised medical exam. For these young people, it's a much broader awakening against the system they feel has completely forgotten to count them.
Moving on to Section 2, the Sansad Chalo March. To really understand how the standoff reached this fever pitch, we have to rewind just a few days to Monday, July 20th. This was the inciting incident that escalated, everything. 50,000. Let that sink in. That is the staggering estimated number of protesters who flooded into central Delhi on that Monday for the CJP's Sansad Chalo, or March to Parliament. Despite the police explicitly denying them permission to march and imposing prohibitory orders, tens of thousands of young people showed up anyway, completely paralyzing the heart of the capital. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Here at the Yellow Barricades, security forces and police personnel are physically straining against the surging crowds of students. What began as a defiant but, peaceful gathering quickly transformed into a really visceral physical confrontation right on the streets.
So let's walk through exactly how rapidly this all escalated. The morning started out peacefully enough, but by early afternoon, as the crowd swelled massively, protesters began breaking through those yellow barricades near the press club, pushing closer to Parliament. Then, by late afternoon, the situation deteriorated entirely. Police deployed tear gas and initiated baton charges, or lathi charges, which resulted in widespread panic and chaos. By the evening, an internet shutdown was actually implemented across central Delhi, and public hospitals reported treating nearly 90 people for injuries, many of them pretty serious.
Which brings us to Section 3, Voices from the Barricades.
Behind those hospital numbers and timelines are the actual, real human experiences of the youth caught right in the middle of this crackdown. Let's look at some first-hand accounts from the chaos of the march. This harrowing testimonial comes from a protester named Saira. She recounted how, as the police charged toward her group, they desperately tried to get off the street. She noted, "The employees of KFC were laughing at us and recording videos when we were pleading with them to let us in to get away from the personnel and the tear gas." I mean, it really grounds this massive political story in a terrifying, isolating reality faced by young bystanders and students who suddenly found themselves trapped in a literal conflict zone.
Another video that surfaced showed an injured student protester who actually had a tear gas shell explode right near his feet. He asked, "We are not criminals. Are we terrorists or what? Why is such action being taken against us? The police are supposed to help us." Honestly, this quote really speaks for itself. It showcases the profound sense of betrayal and confusion felt by the youth, and it perfectly sets up the two fiercely conflicting narratives that emerged in the aftermath of July 20th.
So, the crucial point here is that we have two vastly different accounts of what happened that afternoon, and we absolutely must look at both to get the full picture. On one side, the CJP and the students claim the police engaged in unprovoked lathi charges on peaceful youth. There are allegations that expired tear gas was used and that men in plain clothes were seen beating students with batons. But on the other side, the Delhi police claimed that the protesters had no permits, formed an unruly and aggressive mob, damaged public property and government vehicles, and ultimately left 118 police personnel injured. The police maintain they used professional, restrained action against a situation that was completely spiraling out of control.
Now let's shift gears to Section 4, the political fallout.
As visuals of these street-level clashes went viral, the agitation quickly bypassed the protest sites and slammed directly into the macro-political arena. National leaders are now heavily involved. Take a look at this number, 152. This is the figure brought forward by Congress leader Rahul Gandhi. During a press conference, he claimed that over the last decade there have been 152 paper leaks in the Indian education system. That affects roughly 7.5 crore students and their families with zero convictions. The opposition has totally seized upon the CJP's momentum to highlight what they're calling a rigged system.
And this led to some incredibly dramatic scenes on Wednesday. Prominent political figures, including Congress leaders Rahul Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, and Samajwadi Party chief Akhilesh Yadav, staged a surprise sit-in directly outside the Prime Minister's residence. The images of these high-profile leaders being physically picked up, carried away, and detained by police, it perfectly illustrates how a grassroots student protest has managed to completely paralyze the national political establishment. Even inside the parliament chamber, proceedings were suspended as the opposition demanded accountability.
So now we're looking at a fierce political tug of war. The opposition accuses the Modi government of avoiding accountability, ruining India's most valuable asset, its education system, and unleashing brutality on peaceful students. Conversely, the ruling BJP accuses the opposition of hijacking a student movement to seek political mileage. The government maintains that the police showed necessary restraint against an unauthorized march, and they insist they remain sensitive, open to dialogue, and committed to delivering reforms.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds. What happens next?
The situation on the ground right now is anything but resolved. The lines have been drawn and the standoff continues. The government has actually reached out to negotiate, but the CJP, they are playing absolute hardball. When Union Minister J.P. Nadda invited CJP representatives to his residence for talks, the CJP categorically declined. They flat out stated they refused to go to anyone's house or office for backroom meetings. Instead, they're insisting on a Janata Darbar, a public court. They want the ministers to come directly to the people at Jantar Mantar, or at the very least, meet at a neutral venue nearby. It's a clear signal that the youth are no longer willing to play by traditional political rules.
And remember, all of this is happening under the shadow of activist Sonam Wangchuk, whose initial protest really helped spark this fire to begin with. He has now reached day 25 of his indefinite hunger strike, and his fragile condition actually required him to be shifted to Medanta Hospital. In a really poignant moment, the CJP issued a public statement begging him to end his fast to save his health. They promised him that his sacrifice has inspired a generation and that the youth will carry the movement forward until their demands are met.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. The events of July 20th and the ongoing standoff at Jantar Mantar have totally shattered any illusion that the despair of this generation can just be contained or ignored. With millions following online and thousands holding the line in the streets, will the government finally meet the Cockroach Janta Party's demands? Or are we witnessing the birth of a prolonged nationwide movement that will completely reshape Indian politics? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on this story, you guys, because it is evolving by the hour.